Hey guys, coming to Easter morning here. I'm going to talk about something that I've been asked a couple times while I'm at the lake. What lure you're using, what color, why you're using it, how you working it. Springtime is your pre-spawn and spawning time. This is your chance to get that hog female bass, that 5, 6, 7, 8 pounder, depending on where you live in the country. I'm in Indiana, so usually it's that 5 to 6 pounder. Occasionally you'll get something bigger. They're hard to find. This is your time to really get them. Unfortunately, I've been shore fishing, which I've been trying to get away from, but my boat's in the shop, so I'm waiting. Hopefully Tuesday or Wednesday I'll get that back. I'm going to talk to you about some of the different lures that you can use during spring, depending on your fishing style and your personal preference. Personally, I like a jerk bait, spinner bait, chatterbait. I don't really stray from that too much because they're just known producers for me. There are a lot of other baits you can use during the pre-spawn. Right now, during the pre-spawn, a lot of people can use a square bill. And I have used this a couple times. I've got one or two fish. It just hasn't been a producer for me this year. They can produce. When I do use them, I use a craw color. They're going to be feeding. They're gonna try and get as much food as possible right now during that pre-spawn to spawn. Period. Excuse me. They're going to feed. They're coming out of winter, which is that starvation stage where they're not eating as much. They're still a little lethargic. They're wanting to get a lot of food and energy to brew those eggs and spawn. Um, Another one is the rattle trap, chatterbait. Not chatterbait. This is one of those that it has many different names depending on where you're at in the country. I definitely use a craw color. I use a suspending one so I can work it a little slower. I work it in those grassy areas around structure. If you can get away with it, a lot of people can't. I'm not one of those that can get away with it. I definitely use it around the grass and the weeds. It'll get in there, it'll get tied up, it'll get stuck, and you'll pull, and then it rips out. And that's usually when you get your strike. Is on when it comes launching out of those weeds. That bass is going to be sitting there watching it, waiting, and then once it goes, you're going to get that reaction. You want a rod that loads up. You want to use fluoro. You don't want to use braid. Braid will just rip it right out real quick. You want this to kind of come out slow. So you want a rod that loads up and line with a little bit of memory and give. So when it comes out at a pace. One of the lures I've been using that has produced this year is a jerkbait. Now, when I use jerkbaits, I go from one extreme to the other. I go from the biggest jerkbait I got in my box, which is usually this guy, or a husky jerk, one of the big husky jerks. This will produce depending on what lake, what pond I'm fishing that day. I love natural colors when I'm using these. As you can tell, I got two perch, two different sizes. And this is about as small as I'll go. And these work great. The reason I go from large, if I'm not getting bit, and I don't go work my way through, is, excuse me, if they're not biting the big one, I'm not going to waste my time going through trying to figure out what they're going to eat. I'll go straight to the small one. The reason is this is about the time when bass are starting to school a little bit. So when you use a small one, you might get one or two of the small ones in the school to bite. When that happens, it starts to build a little bit of a feeding frenzy. Eventually, that big one's going to eat too, because it's going to start something. I don't know what it is about it, but it works. You can use these and start to get the rest of the school to start biting. And that's one of the ways I get them when they're right in that pre-spawn. They're moving up into the shallows. I love the perch. Bass and pike, especially, they don't want to eat a bluegill. Not all the time. Sometimes they will, but they want a soft fin fish. They want something that's oily. They want something that really will give them a lot of nutrients and energy that's worth the energy they're going to put into getting that bait. Let's go to the next lure. A lot of you guys love to jig. Let's talk about jigs. I've got a couple of different colors here. You know, from your finesse to your pitching jigs here. Even some with rattles in them. These are great because you can work them slow. You can work them in that cover. When I do, I usually go with a more natural color like this. Again, trying to lean towards a craw. I actually got one rigged up right here. Got a big old football jig, more of a purplish. I paired it up with this, the Rage Tail Craw, Rage Chunk. I love this. It's a Falcon Lake Craw. It's got that reddish and brown and green in it. I've got a couple good fish on this so far this year. I think I caught like 2 3-pounders. You can work them slow. You can work them deep in that cover. You know, this is usually where I'll work braid or, you know, a 12, 15, 20-pound fluorocarbon I can get away with in that cover. I would love to use some braid. I don't have any on my rods right now. It's pretty early in the season. I haven't been jigging in there too much. I've been mostly throwing spinners and chatterbaits and jerk baits because that's my go-to. I haven't really been throwing a lot of plastics yet, not until they're on the beds. When they get in the bed, that's when I'll be throwing a lot more, you know, finesse style and weedless. One that has been producing is the spinner to me, the double willow, different color blades, nice and light. Maybe I'll throw a trailer on it. And I've used trailers like this. You know, they're fun to use. You can work them high, you can work them low, you can work them right next to the surface, you can put them right in the cover, and that's when a spinner really shines. So when you work it in that cover, when they bang off a stick, they bang off the grass, that's when they usually work the best for me. And when we're talking about trailers, I can get into another video about that if you guys want to get into depth about trailers. I'll still talk about it a little bit today. And, you know, I kind of went the two extremes. You know, I got a real light one with willows, and then I got a real dark, heavy one with a rattle and a Colorado blade. I kind of do the same with my jigs, you know. Got a finesse with the blue and black, the classic blue and black. You're going to be using that in your muddiest water. You don't want real flashy because they're not going to see it. You got to get something that they're going to kind of pick up on, and that's going to be blacks and blues. You know, I got more of a natural color here on a jig. You got to pick what's going to work during that the watercolor and the temperature of that day. And it's kind of hard to pick that out sometimes for some people. There's a lot of stuff online. If you really want me to get into colorations and all that, drop me a message on my Facebook and we'll see if we can get a video for you guys. Same with about trailers. If you want a trailer, if you want to talk about a specific bait, drop me a message. I don't mind getting into just one thing. This is kind of a broad spectrum today. The other one that's really been producing for me this year is the chatterbaits. Now, these are a hard item to get into for some people. They're not sure if they want to try them or anything. Me personally, I love them. I use them around docks. I use them around structure. I use them in open water. I just use them a lot. You can throw trailers on these. You can throw them bare. You can work them across the bottom and hop them. I mean, they're just so versatile. I rarely take one of these off my line when I'm fishing. Rarely. I use them in spring, summer, fall. They're just an all-around great bait. You can get them to, you know, look like a frog with frog trailers. I need to trim this skirt up so it doesn't interfere with the trailer. You know, you can modify them like you can a jig. They're just awesome. Got one of those tied up right now too. On my Black Max. Right there, I use the Fat Albert Double Tail Grub. I mean, it just works in there so perfect. That green pumpkin it's such a natural color in these lakes up here. and this is what's been my producer of fish. Anywhere from 1 pounders to 3 pounders. I've been catching them on this the most of my time. If they're not biting this, I'll work to a jerk bait. I'll work to a spinner, and then I'll work to a jig. Something that's slow. And talking about the trailer on them, I always try and pick something natural. I always try and, especially on these chatterbaits, I use a trailer that's not going to interfere with it, that's going to flow with how that blade is moving back and forth. You can't throw, this would be a great color to throw on there, this tail. When you're using them on these chatterbaits, what happens is there's so much water turbulence, that tail ends up coming up here. And one of the things that you should do is just snip that end off. If you're going to use one of these as a trailer on a chatterbait, snip that off. And that action will really improve. It'll start moving more. But if you want to keep the tail, turn it upside down. I know a lot of people are going to look at me like I'm crazy, but it works. That tail starts to straighten out and it starts to move correctly. It's one of the things I've found out about these. I just love them so much and I use them so much. That's why I use it. Otherwise, I'll use a grub or even a rage tail. I use a lot of rage tails like I had on that jig. Just something that kind of mimics that craw right now, especially. You can, I just said you can use those. I can even use a single tail grub. I've been really using the Fat Albert from Zoom. They're great. They last long. They're cheap relative to some of these other baits like the Yums and the Rage Tails, and they just work. It's true what they got on their packaging. Bass love them. Now that we've gotten most of those out of the way, and don't be afraid to throw a trailer on a spinnerbait either. It can work too. I mean, there's so many different types of trailers you can use on these things. Another one, just using a single tail grub like I had here in the chartreuse. Use a green chartreuse head. Hop that right through that structure, if you can. I usually use these around rocks. I don't really use these around too much wood structure. I get hung up a lot. If you're going to be doing a lot of wood structure, move to something like that woolly bug. These have been a big producer as well for most people. I mean, these are great for bed fishing too. You can modify them. You can take that tail off. You can take the arms off. Hop it through there on what most people use is that Texas rig, that bullet weight. Now this is just a cheap bullet weight from Walmart, and I'll tell you what, I hate them. I don't like them. They come with some sharp edges. I've actually had them fray my line before I snip it off and retie them. I'm moving to Titan Tungsten. They have just the best quality tungsten weights out there that I have found yet. And I pair that up with a 4/0 or 5/0 Gamakatsu hook. I'll hook them weedless. Throw it through there. What I usually do is I use this hook as a base. Come up to that bend, that first bend, kind of go past it, pull it through. Bring it so that line is all the way up inside there. That bend comes out. Kind of mark out with your hook where it needs to be. That way you get a straight and even hook and bait. See how even that turns out? Bass pick up on that. I'm not going to lie to you guys. That's one of the things that can turn a bass off is if that thing is not hooked up right. And same with these chatterbaits, especially these Z-Man ones, which is the only chatterbait I'll throw anymore. I've got some of these cheaper ones, and the blade does not start up right away. This Z-Man, yes, they're pricey. Some of them can get into $12, $15, $16, $18, but they're worth it. It's the difference between a bass following and a bass on your boat. I use it a lot around wood structure, and the difference is when I hit that wood or hit that grass and they hit something, I need that blade to start right up, right away. And that's why I use Z-Man. And they just have better options with them. They got wire keepers on the hook, everything. But I use these. I'll even rig it without a weight. But when that weight comes down and you pull it down into that structure, that's killer, man. Same thing with it being in spawn, and I use that lizard. It just works. And I use a lot of the watermelon chartreuse. I even rig my swim baits up like that, or I rig them without a weight. I mean, and then you can go to that finesse style. That finesse style also works really well. This is the Zoom trick worm, and you can rig those with these stand-up jig head with the wire weave guards. I've even used them with the weighted hook, corkscrews. I usually use these on these bigger swim baits, just so they stay upright and they swim correctly. But the best way I've ever found to do this is with a split shot, just a straight shank hook. Take that straight shank and work it in there just right. And just barely put that in the belly. And what that does is this will give you an easy hookup. Now the problem with this is when you yank on that fish, when you yank that lip, it's going to make a big hole. So keep tension. Get that thing on the boat right away. Don't let it shake too much in the water. When you rip on that, it's going to make a bigger hole than what that Gamakatsu hook would. That 4 or 5/0 will make a smaller hole. And I've landed more fish on this than I do this. But I get more hookups with this. It's a double-edged sword. So it just depends on the day if I'm going to go to a straight shank or not. Usually I won't. There's times I will. I think that's pretty much all I can really cover today, just on the spring baits real quick today. If you want me to go in depth more about a certain bait, let me know. We'll make another video and I'll go into just jerk baits or just rattle traps, just jigs, just these chatterbaits. I might do a video on these chatterbaits actually, because I'm a firm believer in these things. These things are awesome. They're worth the money. If you can find these Z-Mans, go check them out. Go look at each model. They make a ton of them. Some of them are more in your price range than others just for a single bait. Right now I've got like 3 or 4 of these Z-Mans, and I love them. I won't go to a different chatterbait. This, I'll probably give this away to somebody because it's just not a Z-Man, and it takes, a second or two for that blade to start up. I've had a lot of follows, but nothing commits when I hit structure. If I'm going open water, yeah, I'll throw it. But if I'm in a heavily weeded or structured area, I won't. I think that's really all I can cover. So, guys, remember, keep your lines wet and your rods bent.